Would like to welcome everybody to another edition of Truth Seekers. We have Adam joining us today. We will introduce him in a second and be off and running in our conversation. Just want to remind everybody where you can find Coach Nick and myself, Coach Josh, of course, on ProAdvisorCoach.com, and anywhere you watch your podcasts. So we have Adam joining us today. He is the owner of Rock My Resume and Jackson Square Company. Adam, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So owner of a couple companies, a lot going on. Why don't we start out with maybe what's going great in your businesses? I know that both of them are kind of mission directed and having a lot of success early on. So just maybe give a brief synopsis of where you're at right now.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, as you said, I have two companies. One is a recruiting agency called Jackson Square Company. Here we specialize in sales positions, anything that's revenue generating related. We also do, marketing positions and things like that. So last year, unfortunately, the pandemic happened, as we all know, and it was not good for the recruiting industry. As you can imagine, companies, really couldn't hire because, things were just, everything was a question mark. No one knew what would happen. So I was in a position where I had several contracts with clients, and unfortunately, they decided to freeze hiring, which is very understandable. And then I was kind of sitting there, my income had froze at that time as the owner of the company. And I kind of, had to determine, what's the next move. So I actually just, to have something coming in, I decided, let me do a couple of resumes. Let me help people write their resume. So I did some resumes, I provided some career coaching, and, one thing led to another, and actually decided to start a resume company because it was going so well. So eventually I wasn't doing the writing myself and I wasn't doing the coaching myself. We started to, hire more people. So now we have over a dozen writers that are writing the resumes. We have team leaders, we have chief resume editors, we have career coaches, and we have career coach managers. So we just launched the website in September of last year. And we're also in the midst of redesigning our website. So a lot of exciting things going on. And each month this year is actually a record month, which is amazing, and I'm extremely thankful for that and my team. So, there's no really one thing to attribute that to. It's just a matter of having the right people, and all the hard work is just kind of starting to pay off,
That's so cool. Such a cool story that one business led to another because of something that was seemingly negative, but you took that as an opportunity. And I actually want to pass this off to Coach Nick. Whenever he uses his body and he gets all excited, I want him to ask the next question. So,
yeah,
Coach,
absolutely.
What's sticking with you, Coach? What did you notice? What do you want to ask Adam?
Just you get to choose. Right? Like here's the scenario. The environment gives us something which can be perceived as negative, can be perceived as not working, can be perceived as problematic. The world's ending. But we get to choose to see it like that, or we get to choose to see it as an opportunity. How can I change things now based on what I know is true? What might be available? What can I create that didn't exist before? What something now that I can put out into the universe that just quite frankly would not have been there if everything was just the way it was. Right, so I think it's spectacular, Adam. What a great actual real example of that. So congratulations. So
appreciate
cool.
it. Yeah.
Tell me in
it's
a
all
moment.
about adaptability, right? Being able to adapt to the market. So I was working with the companies finding employees, and now I'm working with the employees or the candidates trying to help them find companies to hire them. So believe it or not, I'm actually having a lot more impact on lives, because instead of doing, as you may know in recruiting, you could be profitable with one deal every 2 or 3 months by closing one candidate as a small agency. But with and then of course you're getting one job for one person, several times a year. But with writing resumes and doing career coaching and LinkedIn optimization and really helping people, guide them in the right direction, we're able to help dozens of people every month. So we're already at over 50 orders this month, and we're on around halfway through the month. So really excited about that, and it's all because we have kind of adapted to the market and understood that, instead of focusing on the companies, let's go ahead and focus on the candidates. And it really paid off in the long run. So instead of hunting those, big, what my friend Will would call those elephant deals, instead we're hunting these kind of squirrel, and getting these smaller deals. So instead of the, low a high ticket, low volume. We're doing low ticket, high volume. So we're getting a lot of sales, but of course they're much smaller than, of course, one placement for recruiting.
I can definitely attest as well. Here in North Carolina, there are a lot more squirrels than elephants. That seems like a realistic approach. I'm curious, Adam. I'd love if you would share in that moments, hours, days, weeks, whatever it was, when you had that realization that like, there's no more jobs coming in,
Right.
companies aren't hiring, my income's frozen, like it's
Right.
not good. What was the thought process that you went through? Like, what was the realization moment? Like, how long did you spend in a place which was not good? Like, how? Just talk us through that.
Sure. Yeah. So this was March last year, right? As we all know. So I remember very specifically, I was watching Tiger King, and I was watching the Michael Jordan documentary because they both came out right at that time. So, once I finished those, then I had to come back to reality a little bit. And I kind of, I was kind of twiddling my thumbs, and I said, what can I do? And I'm brainstorming ideas. And what I like to take initiative. So I would throw down a bunch of ideas on a piece of paper, and I just said pros and cons. What are the pros and cons of going with each of these type of business models? A lot of things that I do in business are trial and error. You don't know if something works until you try it, right? So that's what I did. I tried out doing a resume. It worked out. And after just 2 or 3 of them, I said to myself, you know what? I can teach people how to write these resumes, and then I can also teach people how to provide the coaching. And that's exactly what ended up happening. So it's just a matter of incremental improvements. And that's what we've been doing for a full year to get to the point where we are today with Rock My Resume. Just those small incremental improvements, and all the decisions that we made 3, 4, 5 months ago, those are coming into fruition now, right? Me talking to my operations manager about, having, full-time writers instead of part-time or contract writers, that's a huge difference. That's a huge change. So, all of these big decisions I think about, but of course you can't spend too much time thinking. You have to implement, right?
I mean, Coach, how much is this resonating with our content? This is just perfect incremental improvements. I mean, that's what we preach every day because that's all we have, right? That's all we have, these notions and visions of grandeur and how to make a huge difference. And there's one of the coach's favorite quotes is there's no big things. It's all little things compounding on top of each other.
Right.
So here's where my mind goes. I'm just curious, I think it takes a lot of experience and knowledge and wisdom and just going through some things to get to that level. Where does that come from? How have you grasped that concept? Where's that come from?
That's a great question. So I would say my biggest asset in life is failure. The fact that I failed so many times in my life allowed me to feel confident about making these decisions, right? So this is not my first company or my second company even. This is actually my third and my fourth company. My first company, you can call it a failure, but I started a events company in New York when I was living in Buffalo. I was doing events at different clubs and different venues and things of that nature, music events, different types of clubs and things like that, and parties. And then I moved. And then when I was living actually in Europe, which we can get into in a bit. So when I was living in Europe, I started a recruiting agency. That was my second company. That was called Gold Jobs. And I worked with companies all over Europe, call centers mostly, and just helped them with finding employees. So I tell people all the time, I am one of the best failures that you'll ever meet, because I have failed in all these different places around the world. I failed in Israel. I failed in Europe. I failed when I was in China. I failed when I was in America. And the fact that I failed, I teach people, 2 very important things for me in business is understanding how to fail and self-awareness. Okay. So understanding how to fail essentially means, how to get back up, not going out and looking to fail, right? But going out and taking risk, going out and taking high risk. And with that, when you fail, you have to kind of look at things in hindsight and say, how did I react to that failure? How can I be better? When I fail at something, how can I take that failure and take that energy of that emptiness and whatever that feeling of negativity is, how can I filter that and make it positive, into the right direction. And then the second aspect is just self-awareness, understanding who you are, what you're good at, what you're not good at, right? So I'm not good at a lot of things, right? But I don't have to be great at everything. My employees all have to be hopefully great at everything. So my idea as the owner, I want to surround myself with people who are smarter than me and people who are better than me at those particular things. And then I could take advantage of what I'm best at, which is, communicating, running the teams, maybe, helping with the sales process, improving the overall, quality of the resumes and quality of the customer experience. So these are the things that I've been spending my time on now that I have all of my employees kind of helping me with dealing with the particular orders and helping speak with the customers.
So much there. Teaching, would you say teaching people, understanding how to fail and self-awareness?
Right. Two of the most important things that had led to my success. So I success is different for everybody. Now I feel successful because of all the failures that I've overcome. Right. So we've spoke, we had preliminary conversations before this, and I told you about, my life and all of the bad things that have happened to me and all the negative things. You kind of want to use that as an asset, right? Because the fact, if you were homeless, or if you were poor, or if you didn't have, any means when you were younger, or even now, you can look at that as a disadvantage, or you can look at that as an advantage. As silly as that sounds, poor people can actually have an advantage. Why? Because they want it more, right? So, so I had, a difficult upbringing, you can say, and the fact that I had, seen kind of both sides of the table, right? Where I saw the being poor, I felt what that was like, and I also felt the luxury life. So, having that contrast in life I think is important as well.
Yeah, so much of success is overcoming obstacles. I think that's that's been a theme in
Right.
most of our episodes. So, maybe if you could talk a little bit more about that, because it's difficult when you're in it, right? You don't see your failure as a good thing. And I think that was the coach's first question was like, take us back to that moment and how did it feel to have your assets frozen, all that. But maybe talk a little bit more about those obstacles. If you
Sure. So I can touch on one particular scenario. So I was I was young. I was 16 years old, and I wasn't a very good student in high school. And I decided that I had kind of enough. I wanted to get to college. I wanted to get to the next level. I didn't value high school education. My perspective changed since then, but at that time I didn't really value the education that much. So what I decided to do is drop out. And when I did drop out, everybody around me, kind of looked down at me and said, you get used to working at McDonald's, get used to working at Burger King. You should be a burger flipper, whatever the the analogy, whether it's a janitor or a burger flipper is one of the two usually. But my family, my mother, my father, everybody around me who were closest to me, who wanted me to be successful, told me that I would become a failure because I dropped out. But I had a plan. So I wasn't just going to drop out and just sit around. I was actually going to drop out and get my GED, which actually ended up happening. So I got my GED, and I ended up starting college at the age of 17, which is a little bit early. So I went from being kind of a loser, someone who everyone said that he would not be successful, even people who had no business telling me that, to within a few months later, they're congratulating me on being accepted to college before all of my friends. So that was the first time in my life that I actually took control of my situation. And I didn't allow other people to dictate my life, because a lot of people will do that. Naturally, your parents want the best for you, but they also don't want you to take too much risk, right? They also don't want you to put yourself in financial harm or any harm, so to speak. So they want to keep you safe, but safe is not always the best choice, right? So my mindset since that time is, high risk, high reward. And my brother actually is actually kind of the opposite, where he has, wants to take low risk, but he understands that it's more of a low reward. So it's more of a conservative approach, as opposed to me, where I'm a little bit more aggressive. Not to say one is wrong or one is right. It's just a matter of preference, right?
So as the bias you have is towards action and knowing that, look, if it doesn't work out, then great, I'll learn something and I'll actually get stronger because of it. That I just dig into that because it's so powerful, right? Like it's taking your like certainty into the uncertainty. So
Right.
anytime you put yourself out there for high risk and it doesn't work out, that actually makes you take even more risk. But
Right.
like it doesn't slow you down. It speeds
Exactly.
you up. Essentially, gives you energy from doing that. So it's
Mhm.
like you want to have the balance between like the self-awareness you talked about it as like understanding the value of failure with the self-awareness. So you can take the failures, be aware of what didn't work, don't do that, but take the lessons and use them again. I think that's what you're saying. That almost is the duality of life, right? Because you've got on the one side you've got the freedom to just move forward as much as you can and just do everything you like. On the other side of that, there's the rigidity of like don't do anything because if you do something that like what happens if you lose everything, and you can't be over there all the time because you can't create more and be more and become more, and like human civilization wouldn't be where it is if people were over here. But then conversely, if it was all down to the freedom side, what do you get then? You get just chaos.
Right.
So you've got to have the self-awareness of one side of knowing that like you don't want to repeat mistakes per se, but you do want to have them so you can take the lessons out of them to do it again. So what would you share with someone who and say like, look, well, I can say like it's all fine for Adam because now he's on his third and fourth business and he's seen some success. And then in some sense, like the thing that he picked to work on in the pandemic worked. But what about me? What if I don't get that some level of success? What if I don't pick the right thing? What might you say to those people, Adam?
You're kind of just asking, what about, other people who are in similar positions who might not have that type of experience to fall back on?
Yeah, absolutely. Like what might you lean back on to say, like, if I don't have that direct experience and I can hear the example, I know it's true because what he's sharing is real examples of his life,
Right.
but that's okay for Adam. What about me? Like, how
Right.
can I get myself to do those things? What might you say to those people?
So one, we'll take a step back and say, right back to self-awareness. What are you good at? Right. If you're not a good writer, then you're not going to start a resume writing company, right? It's most likely you're not going to start a writing company, but it doesn't mean you're not good at presenting. If you're good at presenting, then maybe you can start a course about this. What do you like to talk about? You like to talk about finance? Start a finance course. It does, you don't, understand the laws and understand what type of certification and what type of licenses you need to give financial advice, or you use that disclaimer like they do on YouTube and they just say this is not financial advice, and then they just give financial advice. So there's ways around that type of stuff. And I would say for me, once again, it always comes back to those two things. Self-awareness. Understanding what is it that you're good at, and then understanding that failure is imminent. Right? You're going to fail. Just how bad are you going to fail is the question, and how are you going to react is the second question. Right? That's kind of where my head is at, and if someone were to ask me for advice in that aspect, I think that's probably what I'd say.
That's so interesting to me. I want to talk through my thoughts because I don't know how I feel about this yet because my perception has changed about failure.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's ingrained in us so early on that failure is a bad thing.
Right.
But I'm well aware there's companies out there that promote failure in their company culture. I can't list them off the top of my head, but there's some famous examples of that.
Right.
So it's such a funny thing because we're just not taught that. But what this conversation is centered around so far today is that failure is a good thing. And I think that sort of reframing, we talked about reframing in past episodes with emotion and other things, but failure in particular is so interesting to me because it means that you're not succeeding. But it's only if you end there, like if it's a blip on a much greater journey, it's just like think of the stock market, right? It goes up and down on those low points. On that day, it is the worst thing ever. You zoom it out over a 10-year period, it's like, oh yeah, remember that time? It was just like a little low point. So to have that perspective, I guess was maybe where my mind goes. It's just in the grand scheme of things, it's far less significant than what it feels in the moment.
Right. So yeah, I feel a lot of business owners or people who are thinking about even starting a business, they're kind of paralyzed by that idea of what if it doesn't work out, And the truth is, a lot of businesses were never started because of that feeling that you get of uncertainty, right? I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know how to be successful. But when I say, failure is good, failure, it's not, I'm not saying you should go out seeking failure, but I'm thinking that when you, once again, when you're in this position where you're considering to start a company, you want to kind of map out, what are the potential threats, right? What are the things that could potentially stop your income or prevent you from succeeding in your company? And one thing that I really appreciated, since we started talking, Josh, is that mind scan. And, you guys could do this mind scan, and I'm not sure if your viewers have seen this, but it was actually really insightful. And even as a career coach, there's a lot of very useful information in there. So I haven't got a chance to read through the whole report, but I read through it, briefly with you. And those are things that I'm always looking for is, also self-improvement, once again, these incremental improvements, not just for the company, also for myself, so at a younger age, I've kind of made a decision that every day should be a successful day, whether you fail or not. Every day should be progress, right? Just because you failed doesn't mean you didn't make progress, right? So, so for me, what does that mean to make progress in a day? That can mean anything. That can mean applying for a job. That can mean getting a new resume. That can mean, building a new connection. That can be joining a new business network, right? So whatever that means to you, however you're going to, whatever you're going to do, once again, it's about those incremental improvements. So once a day, you make one decision a day, and you continue to make these small improvements, and eventually, they're going to start to pay off. And I'm a strong believer in that. And I don't think, I think Jeff Bezos actually said this, that he only makes a couple big decisions a day. He doesn't want to overwhelm himself. And I think that is a great way to live and a great way to run a business, because if you're the one that's making all the big decisions, then something's wrong, right? As an owner of a company, you have to start to trust people. You have to give other people the keys to the door. You have to give other people the ability to make these type of decisions, because if you don't, you're going to be paralyzed with all these decisions to make every day, because everything is connected to you, right? So I read it somewhere that a successful business is a business that will continue even if the owner or the CEO is not around, right? So that's what I'm trying to build. I'm trying to build a company where, God forbid something happens to me, the company would still, be able to run successfully without me having to be kind of that center, right? And that focal point. Exactly, right.
Yeah, it's like the bottleneck, right? Like every leader of the company is the bottleneck, no matter how successful or not, is the mindset and skills of the leader. So you want to get yourself out of the way as quickly as you possibly can, right? Every company that we're running should be run to exit. Even if you don't want to exit, it should be in a way that you can. So as you said, step away still works. Otherwise, you're just a highly paid employee. Maybe not even highly paid, because of the company, right? You're probably not paying yourself much. Can be in some circumstances. So like always running that is so important. And I think just your question overall about failure, coach, I think it's good to define as well what we actually mean by failure, right? Because there could be, but there's socially accepted meanings for words that we have in the English language, but everyone has a slightly different version of what that is, right? And so you could, like clearly, Adam, you've got a very healthy meaning. I'm not quite sure the meaning is, but of what failure is. But we could define that, right? And we might say that failure is just when you give up. Like that's what failure is. So maybe the other definition of failure is that when it stops working. Well, what does that even mean? It stops working, like it doesn't work out. Like you said, it doesn't work out. Like you're referring to someone like someone else in the space. Like, oh, I'm not going to start in case it doesn't work out. Well, what does not working out even mean? Does that mean if it doesn't get to 10 million,
that's a great question.
Then it's not there? Yeah, you got to define it.
Right. So I think everyone kind of has their own definition of failure. For me, failure. For example, the most recent failure that I have is I wanted to do affiliate marketing, right? And I wanted affiliates to send traffic to my website. So I signed up with an affiliate marketing company. I started signing up with affiliates. I started paying them to build good relationships. At the end of the day, I was really just coming out of pocket for nothing. They really weren't providing much value for me. So at that point, I had to look at, the facts. Okay. I said, how much did I spend with this money? It was roughly about $1,000 that I spent with them. And until I found out that it really wasn't being that profitable. So now I have a choice, right? And I'm at a crossroads. I can keep investing time and money into that, or I can quit like a failure, whatever you want to say. I can take it as a failure, take it as an L, and then move forward and readjust my strategy, focus on the things that will be successful. So it's like, okay, I could check that off. So once again, you can look at it as two ways. You can look at it as a failure, or you can look at it as a success, because now I check that box, right? Now I'm not going to do that. So now I know that I'm not going to do that. I spent, let's say, $1,000. Now I don't have to spend more money on doing that. And now I can focus my time and energy on other things. And me and my operations manager, we constantly were working on it. And we spent more time than money on that, on working with affiliates. But in the end, we were pushing something that wouldn't work. So we had to kind of go to other sources and find other solutions of how to acquire new clients.
Yeah. It's iteration. So Tony Robbins' quote for you is that the only time we fail is when we give up. So okay.
Yeah. So that's a great one as well. So you can look at it as a small failure. You can look at it as a failure where, once again, if you quit, then you're a failure. But at the end of the day, it's not over, right? Unless you're dead, it's not over, right? And that goes for relationships, that goes for, business, that goes for friendships. If you guys are still alive, it's not over yet. So even if this business, doesn't go well, the next 2 or 3 months, and I have more and more failures than I had in the recent months, how I react to that is really going to define my business, really. So I'm not expecting to have record months for the rest of my career at this company. That would be a little bit far-fetched to believe that eventually it will plateau. And at that point, we're going to have to kind of readjust and understand how we can continue to increase the volume.
Cool. Yeah, there's always more, right? There's no finish line. It just keeps going and going, which it depends how you define that too for yourself. But I think that's one of the greatest blessings, is that we can keep going, we can keep growing, we can keep going. I want to switch gears a little bit, Adam. I want to ask you, because awareness this seems to be a common theme that we keep coming back to. Maybe talk about, what is the most recent lesson that you've learned in your resume writing business? What have you come to the conclusion of? What's the last failure maybe that you've gone through?
That's great. That's a great question. So you learn more from the customers that are dissatisfied, right, than you do from the customers that are satisfied. When you do an order and we get the resume to the customer and we did a great job, we didn't learn much from that, right? We learned kind of what we did right. But when we get feedback from a customer, and let's say, for example, we have a lot of issues with content writers, as you can imagine, we say, this is a collaborative effort, right? So sometimes it's hard to level with people, and also in a culture in America where the customer is always right, we're actually not building the resume for the customer, right? We're actually building the resume for the prospect employee, right? Or the prospect employer. So the person who's actually going to potentially hire them. So that's why, a lot of times we have to, and so the most recent kind of adjustment that we made was how to handle customers. So I explained to everybody, we had a meeting. I said, okay, this is how we, if a customer is dissatisfied, first thing we do is we tell them, we justify why we made that decision, right? Why did we build a resume like this? Why? Because some people say, this is too wordy for me. Well, we want to be detailed, right? So we have to explain things properly, and we have to do them, efficiently with the right verbiage and whatnot. So I'd say that to kind of wrap it up, the most recent failure, the most recent thing that I've kind of learned from is one of the customers that recently said that she was kind of dissatisfied with the service. So what can I do after that? Once again, I have a meeting internally. I talk to the career coach, say, what happened with this? How can we improve this? How can we avoid this from happening in the future? These tiny little conversation, incremental improvements of, once again, having the writer say, here, this is what we suggest. Now, if you want us to write it your way, we will write it your way. But since we're the ones who are certified, we're the ones who write resumes for a living, this is what we suggest. So that kind of, some changes that we made internally due to one customer that got a little bit frustrated with the process, because we also have multiple coaches, we have multiple career coaches, and I want them to stay with one coach. Right. Ideally, stay with one coach. This customer worked with one of my new career coaches who was not qualified to do all the other things. So then we had to switch her to the other coach who did understand how to do, let's say, interview coaching and LinkedIn optimization, which my newer career coach, her name is Maggie. She's not trained on those things yet. So understandingly, we had to switch the customer over, and then the customer was frustrated because she kept speaking to different people. Right. So the process for my company is once again, continuous improvements. I'm always looking for ways to improve the customer experience, improve the quality of the resumes, and also improve the quality of life for my employees, because, I don't want to overwhelm them. And, I think having that work-life balance is extremely important for a lot of people. For me, it's not so important because I'm obsessed with success, but I think that some of the most successful people in their field have that type of obsession, right? Like Michael Jordan, for example, right? Some would say that it's an unhealthy obsession, right? But I would definitely define that as an obsession.
So I come back to, we want to satisfy our clients, our customers, right? Because what happens when that happens, they want to tell people about it. They're going to have a good experience. It's just spreading good vibes about your company. So I think it's always a give and take, right? Because there are people out there that just will never be satisfied. That's just the cold hard truth of it. But
Right.
To have your approach of like always, always improving, always taking information in.
Right.
It just reminds me of the principle of meeting people where they are. And Coach and I do that every day in our practice, because we get to understand a concept so black and white, so well. And if our clients are not there, we have to get them just to the next level of whatever that means for them.
Mm-hmm.
So when I hear you say, like, you guys are the experts, you know what you're doing, but if a client comes in and just totally rejects your process, you have to meet them where they are. You can't just argue with them and let them, or tell them that your way is right and that you're just going to do it that way. You have to work with them, right? So it's that process that, and from what I'm hearing you say, it makes you better. It makes you and the company better, because like you say, the one manager might not have that experience yet. Well, you only get experience through doing it, right? So it's only a matter of time before that person does have the experience, and then the company gets better for it in the end.
Right. And that goes for, you can categorize mistakes in the same area where it's like, they have to make these mistakes. Some of these mistakes are needed. Now, the mistake where she wasn't trained and we had to pass her to the customer to a new career coach, that's kind of on me, because we didn't have her trained quickly enough, efficiently enough. That's on me. I take the responsibility for that. But she made mistakes on the call, right? She made mistakes dealing with the customer as well. But once again, she's new. So these mistakes are important. These are good mistakes. I told her these are good mistakes. As long as they're not happening in a year from now, they're good mistakes because you're learning from them. And this is still part of your training. So she thinks that, her training is done, and her training is ongoing, just like everybody's training in life. Nobody's perfect. Nobody completes the last stage, the last level of life. This is all, we're all on our own, in our own video game or in our own level, so, I don't compare myself to other people. I don't look at my competition. I actually don't know much about the resume editing industry because I don't look at the competition. But now I'm in a position where these things do have to start being put into consideration for, marketing reasons.
So Adam, so to bring us home, I'm going to kind of open this up for a free play for you. If you want to maybe talk about your company a little bit, I'd like to know maybe about the vision you see, or where you're going, or maybe the mission, or, maybe something you're aware of as far as growth is concerned, but give maybe a little shameless plug about the company, maybe somebody out there that might be a potential client. What might you say, or what might you share about your company?
A lot of times I like to share kind of the process of how it works. So if you'd like, I can kind of go through that, because it's a rather efficient process. So what we do is we start off with an introduction call for the resume, of course, and they gather the information in order to build the resume. So during the call, they talk about, work experience, their job, their criteria, what type of company, work environment, etc. Immediately after that, they forward the information to the writer. The writer then does the keyword research and then starts to build the resume. So it could take 5 to 10 hours. At that time, they submit it to their team leader for proofreading, and then the team leader submits it to the resume editor, the chief resume editor. At that point, the chief resume editor sends it back to the writer, and then the writer makes the final adjustments before we send out the first draft, and that all happens within 48 hours. So as you can see, we have a kind of a great system and a great process set in place to ensure the quality. But once again, it wasn't like this, right? In the beginning, it was just me doing everything. And then as we started to grow, I was a team leader, and then I promoted a team leader, and then I promoted the team leader to the chief editor. And now I have another team leader. Actually, I just promoted today before we got on the call here. So adding that extra layer of management for me is extremely important to scale the company. But to kind of take on another question that you asked me, where do I see the company? I'm a very optimistic person. So I do believe that maybe not with necessarily the same name, Rock My Resume. I don't know how marketable that is. I'd like to have something that's a little bit more geared towards careers and, helping people find jobs, not just resumes. Because once again, we do coaching. We also do reverse headhunting, where we go out and find prospect companies and find individuals within the company to connect with on LinkedIn, get their phone number, email. So we have a lot of amazing tools, not just resumes. And that's kind of where I see the company going. But I personally think that if we can get, if we can kind of rebrand it, I'm very confident that we can eventually be, as silly as it may sound, eventually have an IPO and have a public company on my hands. So that obviously is, for me, is the end goal. And to take a step back onto what Nick was saying earlier, having that end goal in mind in the beginning is also important. Before I did my first resume, I didn't know that it was really be this, but after a few resumes, you kind of have an idea of, okay, this is going somewhere. I want to take it a little bit more serious, and then you're kind of thinking ahead of how can I get to B, right? How can I get from A to B? If B is going public, right, which is a big step, right? How do I get from A to B? What are the steps I need to take in order to get there? And I'll be honest with you, I'm still all the way over here, but I'm making progress, and I'm making progress towards that. So I say, to all the people that I, speak with for motivational speaking and training, shoot for the stars, shoot for the stars, you might hit the moon. And that's what I'm doing. If I fail at becoming a public company, I'm still very confident that the company will be tremendously successful.
Love it so much. Coach Nick, maybe tell us something you're grabbing from today's conversation. What would you like to share with the listeners? There's so much here today, and it's so funny. There's so many principles embodied that we talk about a lot. But what do you want to share?
I want to thank Adam for sharing the story and being in action of what's possible, what's true. And yet another example, Coach, we see this all day, every day, because it's what we do. But most people don't. And there's plenty of opportunity out there to not see this type of thing that works. And so my biggest takeaway here to share with everyone is that there's plenty of people out there doing great stuff. Adam's a great example of that. Go out and get whatever it is you want, wherever in your life. And it might not be in business, it might not anything to do with business or career, just whatever part of your life. Like Adam, you said, shoot for the stars, hit the moon. It's know that anything's possible. Pick a part of your life and see all of these principles at work. Principles of iterating along, keep doing the small things. When it feels like a failure, it's just an iteration, it's just the next step. It's just you allowing you to play yourself the next version of the next game, like the bigger game, and then the bigger game, and continue onwards. So appreciate you coming on and sharing today, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. It's my first podcast, so I'm really excited.
Great.
And hopefully it's the first of many. And if you guys would like to invite me back for a part 2, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, I love that idea. My takeaway today, I'll bring us home here, is the uncertainty and reframing that. If it feels uncertain, the coach is building off of what you mentioned about, go get more of it, go pursue something. If it feels uncertain, you're in the right place then. Just keep pushing through that, because it's always darkest before the dawn. You use that as the blinking light indicator that something really good is about to happen, and you can't fail. As long as you keep going, you can't fail. Awesome. Adam, I'll give you the opportunity. Any last word that you want to share? You've already said.
No, I mean, once again, I appreciate you guys having me. And the 2 things that are important to me, understanding how to fail. It's so important in life. And then self-awareness. Who are you? What are you good at? What are you not good at? Focus on those things that you're good at. So that's it. Thank you guys so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Keep up the great success. Look forward to having you on the show again. Looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Thank you.